Summer sunlight filtered through the pine trees, scattering golden streaks across the soft forest floor. Birds chirped from all corners of the lakeside campground, where the Collins family enjoyed a rare weekend getaway. A peaceful moment that felt like it might last forever. 10-year-old Sophie Collins, wearing red sneakers, was perched on a thick branch nearly 15 feet off the ground. "Dad, look at me!" she called, arms spread wide like wings, her cheeks flushed in the sun. Below her, Nate Collins, 35, a recently retired Special Forces soldier after 3 tours in Afghanistan, looked up at his daughter. His stance still held a soldier's discipline, but his eyes had softened since coming home to Maple Hollow. "You're one brave monkey, kiddo, but don't go any higher. Your mom will kill me if you fall," he laughed, shielding his eyes. Laura Collins, his wife, was nearby, arranging her signature potato salad on the picnic table. Her light brown hair was tied neatly, her face glowing as she cast a playful glance at Betty, their neighbor and long-standing food rival. At her feet lay Max, the family's loyal German shepherd, a scar on his left ear marking his time in combat with Nate. Max rested beneath the tree, eyes flicking between Sophie and the woods, ears alert as if ready to spring into action. "That dog of yours is still on duty," said Tom Granger, sheriff of Maple Hollow, handing Nate a cold beer. Nate chuckled. "Max doesn't know what off-duty means. Guess I don't either." Tom nodded, a reflective look in his eyes. He had once cited Nate for reckless dirt bike racing through cornfields. Now he saw a father, a soldier, and a man he deeply respected. "Back in Kandahar, Max found an IED we would have driven over. No training for bombs, just froze up and refused to go on. Saved the whole unit." Up in the tree, Sophie began humming a tune she'd heard on the radio. Max lifted his head, listening intently, as if understanding each note. "She's got your spirit," Tom said. "And her mother's stubbornness," Nate laughed. "God help us when she hits her teens." Laura walked over then, and Max rose as if escorting royalty. Sophie kicked her legs from the branch and waved. "I can see the lake from here." A loud crack echoed, a branch giving way. Laura screamed. Nate moved with military precision, diving to catch his daughter mid-fall. A hard thud. Pine needles scattered, then silence. "Sophie!" A heartbeat later, soft laughter. "You caught me, Daddy!" Nate held her tightly, arms shaking. "You hurt? Anything broken?" "Nope, just rescued by my superhero." Max bounded over, nose checking each finger, each toe. Laura exhaled and pulled both into a trembling hug. "You're impossible, just like your dad," she said, half laughing, half crying. As afternoon settled into golden dusk, the family sat together at the table. Laughter, the gentle bark of Max, and a quiet sense of gratitude wrapping around them. That rainstorm came without warning. Sheriff Tom Granger was halfway through his meatloaf at Maple Diner when his radio crackled to life. "Single vehicle accident, County Road 18, Devil's Elbow curve." He threw some cash on the table and bolted out into the downpour. The road was slick, the night darker than pitch. His heart pounded when his flashlight bounced off twisted metal beneath a massive oak. The gray SUV belonged to the Collins family. The front was crumpled like foil. The air reeked of gasoline, scorched plastic, and metal. "Nate!" Tom shouted as he spotted an arm hanging limp from the driver's window. Inside, Nate was slumped over the steering wheel, a jagged piece of steel lodged deep into his chest. In the back seat, Sophie's body was bent at an awkward angle, her legs trapped beneath the crushed door. Laura, suspended upside down by her seatbelt in the passenger seat, was the only one conscious. My baby," she repeated when Tom's face appeared in the shattered glass. "Please help her." The rest was a blur. Firefighters with jaws of life, a medical helicopter landing in the nearby field. EMTs bracing Sophie's spine. Nate was declared dead at the scene. Tom remembered standing in the rain, helpless as grief stole the breath from his lungs. The county hospital smelled of disinfectant and sorrow. Sophie survived, but the spinal cord injury was clear. T10 to T12. Incomplete paraplegia. Sensation remained, but no motor function below the waist. Early surgery increases her chances, the doctor said. Laura asked one question. How much does it cost? The doctor hesitated. $40,000 to $60,000 without insurance. Laura stood up, her voice vacant. My husband was between jobs. No policy. We'll manage another way. Tom fought the urge to slam his fist on the table. Laura, the town will help. Fundraisers, veteran support. I'll write letters. Anything. No. Her voice was sharp as glass. We don't take handouts. Sophie didn't understand much, but when she heard her mother decline treatment, her eyes lowered. So I'll never walk again, she asked Tom when he stayed with her during Laura's paperwork. He gripped her small hand, voice tight. You're a little warrior, Sophie. The day Sophie came home, it rained again. Tom drove them in his cruiser. Max, the German shepherd who had once served alongside Nate, was waiting by the door. As the car pulled up, Max stood, tail wagging furiously, as if he instinctively knew she was home. As soon as the door opened, Max rushed forward, circling the wheelchair, pressing his nose into Sophie's hand. Hi, Max, she whispered, her fingers trembling as they touched his fur. Max didn't bark. He simply leaned into her lap, eyes deep and steady. From that day on, Max rarely left her side. He slept by her bed, walked beside her chair, and whenever she cried softly in the dark, he would press his head into her lap, reminding her, "You're not alone." Laura, however, was different, quieter. She did everything mechanically, meals, pills, cleaning, but her eyes always drifted towards something invisible. Max became Sophie's only anchor to the world. Tom visited often, but each time he felt more distance between the walls of that house. Laura's "we're fine" became a habitual barrier. One afternoon, Tom found Sophie on the porch, Max's head resting in her lap. "Uncle Tom, do you think Max misses Dad?" she asked, eyes wistful. "I'm sure he does," Tom replied, sitting beside her. "You're the only reason he keeps going." Sophie nodded, hugging Max's neck tightly. She didn't say it aloud, but Tom understood. Max was the last living piece of her father. At first, everyone thought Laura was just grieving. Maple Hollow, like most small towns, had its way of offering comfort. Fresh pies left at the door, quiet check-ins at the grocery store, thick envelopes tucked into the mailbox with notes reading, "Use it if you need it." But Laura never opened the letters. She didn't touch the pies, and by the second week, she started locking the gate. Sophie noticed first. Therapy sessions were rescheduled, then postponed, then canceled entirely. Laura said, "Therapy just gives you false hope." "But I still feel my legs," Sophie protested. "The doctor said there's still a chance." "There's no money, Sophie, none." Laura's voice was clipped. She slammed a stack of utility bills on the table. Tom visited often, bringing a donation from the local Veterans Relief Fund. Laura declined as always, polite but final. "I don't want people pitying me." "This isn't pity, it's love," Tom said. But Laura's eyes had already shut him out. Then one day, Max was gone. Sophie wheeled around the house, calling until her throat hurt. "Max! Max!" No bark, no click of claws on the wooden floor. Laura stood in the doorway, holding a cold coffee cup. "He's gone." "Gone where?" Sophie's eyes widened. "A family in the next town adopted him. They have kids, a big yard. He'll be happier." Sophie was silent for a long moment. Then the sobs came, loud and shaking. "You can't. He was Dad's. He's my friend. He was a burden. Laura turned away. I can't handle the barking anymore. I can't handle anything else. From that day, the house fell into stillness. No paw steps, no soft whines, just the ticking of the kitchen clock between meals. Sophie began writing letters to Max each night, short, careful lines. It rained today. I miss you. I tried moving my foot. Didn't work. I'll try again. From then on, Max became a forbidden name in the house. Laura never brought him up, and whenever Sophie did, her mother only said, "Let the past stay in the past." But for Sophie, it wasn't the past. It was a loss that had never been given a proper name. Evan Hale arrived after an early autumn rain. Tom first saw him while driving past Laura's house. A tall man with broad shoulders, sleeves rolled, clearing fallen branches from the Collins yard. "Helping out before winter sets in," Laura said when Tom stopped. Her voice was calm, but there was tension buried beneath the words. "Old friend?" Tom asked. "Just someone from the lumber yard. Met through a woman at church," Laura replied, tightening her coat. "He's just being helpful." Evan didn't say much then. He simply smiled, his gaze lingering on Tom just long enough to make the sheriff feel uneasy. But Evan didn't leave. First once a week, then twice, then almost daily. He brought roofing nails, new fence boards, then groceries. Laura began dressing differently. Light makeup, neatly pinned hair. And when Evan was around, she smiled. Not the warm, natural smile Tom once knew, but something forced, like she was playing a role she didn't remember auditioning for. Slowly, Evan began making decisions for the household. He picked dinner menus, changed Sophie's favorite TV channel, rearranged the medicine cabinet. "You should eat more salmon, good for the brain," he told Sophie during dinner, before switching off her cartoons. "Try learning something useful." He was also the first to question, why does she keep drawing? When Sophie stayed silent, he shrugged. Drawing won't get her anywhere. She should learn computers, might actually make something of herself. Not long after, Laura printed out Excel spreadsheets and made Sophie practice typing and data entry. Even when all the girl wanted was to draw Max, her father, and the lake where they once picnicked. One afternoon when Tom dropped by, he found Sophie sitting alone on the porch steps. No sketchbook in sight. Her face was pale, cheeks sunken, hair unbrushed. "Sophie?" Tom sat beside her. "You doing okay?" She didn't answer. Her eyes stared out at the road, where late afternoon light spilled across the trees and cast long shadows toward their doorstep. After a long pause, she whispered, "Uncle Tom, do you think someone can change your mom?" Tom didn't reply right away. The question cut through him like a blade. Laura had once been strong, loving, fiercely independent. Now she moved beside Evan like a shadow, soundless and shrinking. That night, Tom stood by his cruiser, watching the lights inside Laura's home flicker off. In the dim window glow, he saw the silhouettes of two figures, Evan and Laura, pass by the kitchen. But Sophie was nowhere in sight, and he knew the girl was still there, just buried in the quiet, deeper than ever before. Laura no longer looked people in the eye. She moved through the grocery store like a ghost, grabbing the same food out of habit, paying without raising her head. People greeted her. She nodded, then passed by. One time, the shop owner slipped a carton of eggs into her bag without charging. Laura placed it back on the counter, silently. She was visibly thinner. Her clothes hung loose, swallowing her frame. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hair was limp and uncombed. When Evan wasn't around, Laura was a shell, vacant, wordless. But when he appeared, she smiled. Not a real smile, but one that never touched her eyes. Sophie began to fear the evenings. Whenever Evan's footsteps echoed down the hallway, she would fall silent. He never hit her, never yelled. But something about him made the air in the house turn cold, like winter creeping in too early. He only needed to ask, Why haven't you folded your blanket?" And Sophie would shrink like a dry leaf curling inward. Tom sensed something was off. He kept trying to visit, but Laura pushed him away more and more. "I'm tired. Sophie needs rest." Or simply, "not a good time." Meanwhile, the town moved on. At first, they cared. Warm bread, long hugs. But life went on. Everyone got busy. Everyone thought, someone else will help. And so they stepped back. No more phone calls. No one asked if Sophie needed anything. No one came to take her out to the park anymore. Dr. Martha Ellison, the only one still concerned, knocked once after her clinic shift. Laura didn't open. She stood there with a bag of vitamins, then quietly turned away. The house fell into a different kind of silence. No more Max, no more soft pencil sketches, no more quiet songs in the afternoon. Only the ticking of a clock and the soft sound of doors closing, again and again, like the steady rhythm of an invisible prison no one dared to see. Sophie started counting days, not days of the week, but the days since Max was gone, since her mother stopped hugging her, and since Evan started using his own key to come in. At first, she kept tally marks along the edge of her desk. Then she started writing it down in her journal, the same one Evan had called pointless little scribbles. She hid it beneath her seat cushion, right next to the old drawings she no longer dared tape to the walls. One rainy afternoon, the power went out. Evan was fiddling with the circuit box in the basement. Laura had dozed off in the armchair. Sophie sat curled in the corner, candlelight casting warped shadows on the walls like twisting arms. And suddenly she began to cry. Not loudly, not in anger, just silent tears, as if her body had no more room to hold the weight inside. The next day she made her decision. While her mother was out shopping with Evan, Sophie rolled to the landline, hands trembling as she dialed the number she knew by heart. Sheriff Tom Granger's. "Uncle Tom," her voice shook when he answered. "Do you know where Max is? Mom said she gave him to another family, but I called every rescue center. No one has him. She lied." Tom paused. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. And there's more." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Mom's not the same. Mr. Evan lives here now. She says we need a man in the house. But I don't like him. I feel scared. Every time he walks in, it's like the whole house forgets how to breathe." Mom doesn't smile anymore. "Has he hurt you?" Tom asked gently, never looking away. "No, but it feels like I don't exist anymore. Only Max saw me, and now no one does." After the call, Tom sat behind his steering wheel, unmoving. The wind howled against the windshield like a warning. He knew the real storm was coming, and if he didn't step in this time, no one else would. Tom arrived on a Wednesday morning, carrying a basket of crisp red apples, a few boxes of Sophie's favorite cereal, and a packet of documents about a free physical therapy program for minors. The door opened, but Laura stood squarely in the frame, arms folded across her chest. "We don't need anything else, Tom. You may not, but Sophie does." He held the bag forward through the narrow space. "I just want to make sure she's okay." Laura met his eyes, and Tom didn't recognize what looked back at him, cold, practiced, like she had rehearsed this moment. "Sophie is fine, and I'm reducing outside interference. From the town, from doctors, and from you." Tom paused. "You're pulling her from therapy?" "She doesn't respond well to it. I've chosen another path." And Max?" he pressed. "Who did you give him to? I've called every shelter. No one has him listed." A beat. Then Laura turned slightly, lips tightening. "I don't owe you explanations, especially not about what's already in the past." Sophie didn't come to greet him as she usually did. Her curtains were drawn, her window shut. Tom left that day with frustration knotted in his chest. He knew something was wrong, Not just because Max had disappeared or because Laura had become cold to the point of cruelty, but because the entire town was learning to accept silence, and silence was swallowing Sophie whole. Back at the station, Tom opened his computer and typed Evan Hale into the system. No criminal record, no real red flags, aside from some pay stubs from the local lumber mill. But Tom's gut, a gut trained by 30 years of police work, told him the man hadn't just shown up to trim hedges. A week later, Tom returned to the Collins house. This time, no one answered. The door was locked. Lights were on inside, but the curtain stayed shut. He knocked twice, then a third time. Still silence. A shadow passed behind the curtain. Fast, faint. Tom knew it was Sophie, but she didn't come out. Then Laura's voice muffled behind the door. "I've made myself clear, Tom. Please leave us alone." He stepped back, his chest heavy, like he'd just lost something too deep to name. He knew the door had truly closed, not just with hands, but with a heart no longer willing to open. That night, the wind changed suddenly. The air was thick, heavy with damp earth, a quiet warning that something was coming. Laura was driving Sophie on what she called a short trip to clear her head. Evan wasn't with them. Laura barely spoke during the ride. No music, no glance in the rearview mirror. They turned onto a dirt road cutting through the forest, an old trail leading to the family's former campsite, years before the accident. Sophie recognized it and whispered, "Where are we going, Mom?" "Just somewhere quiet," Laura replied, eyes fixed on the road. "You need some space." When the car stopped, dusk had swallowed the forest. Insects hummed, leaves swirled in rising wind. Laura opened the trunk, pulling out a sleeping bag, a bottle of water, and a pouch with a few of Sophie's medications. "What are you doing?" Sophie's voice trembled as her hands clutched the sides of her wheelchair. "You need to learn to be independent," Laura said, avoiding eye contact. "I'll be back soon. Don't make this harder." "You're leaving me here?" Sophie cried. "I can't move. I'm cold. I'm scared." Laura turned, got in the car, and shut the door. The engine started. Headlights flared across tree trunks, then disappeared around the bend. Darkness poured in. The rain came without warning, just like the night of the accident. Wind howled through the canopy. Every thunderclap felt like a fist against Sophie's ribs. She shivered in a soaked sleeping bag, rain dripping onto her face. Her hands gripped the muddy pill pouch, fingers numb, her breath short. "Max," she whispered, voice broken. "I'm scared." No answer. Only the forest breathing, leaves tumbling, lightning flashing across her pale, frightened face. Too small, too alone, under a sky that seemed to be punishing everything beneath it. Back home, Laura showered, let the hot water rinse away the mud and her daughter's cries from her skin. Evan was cooking. When she stepped out, he handed her a glass of wine. "Where's the girl?" "She's staying with a friend tonight. I needed some quiet," Laura answered, avoiding his eyes. He didn't question further. Dinner went on as usual. Stew, roasted meat, and a kitchen too small for truth. Around 8 p.m., Sheriff Tom Granger arrived, carrying a bag of Sophie's favorite cookies. Rain had started to fall harder. Laura opened the door, surprise painted on her face. "Where's Sophie?" Tom asked, peering inside. "She's asleep. I'd like to say hi." "She's tired." Tom paused. The wind blew cold rain under the porch. "Laura, your car's got fresh mud on it. So do your shoes. But your daughter's been asleep all evening?" She said nothing. He stared into her. "What did you do, Laura?" Her fist clenched, her chest rising fast. A second passed, then two, and suddenly, she broke. Tears fell like the storm outside. "She's okay," she stammered. "I just needed quiet. Just one night. I was going to go back before the rain." Tom didn't wait. He turned, sprinted to his cruiser, grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, emergency. Initiate search team, Northern Forest Trail. Missing juvenile, female, 12 years old. Left in the woods. Name, Sophie Collins." The storm howled louder. The real storm had just begun. Sophie dragged herself through puddles, her skin cold enough to turn purple. The rain had eased, but the wind sliced through the woods like knives through thin cloth. Her trembling hands tried to push the wheels, but her chair was stuck in thick mud. Every effort sent pain down her spine. Far ahead through the dripping trees, Sophie spotted a shadow, a small, forgotten wooden shack, almost swallowed by the forest. She used all her strength to slide out of the wheelchair, clawing at roots, rocks, and mud to pull herself inside. The floor creaked. The air smelled like rot, but it was shelter. She curled into a corner, wrapping the damp sleeping bag around her, hugging her knees tight. Her lips turned blue, her eyes shut. "Just a little longer," she whispered. "I don't know how much more I can take." A strange sound broke the silence. Sophie's eyes snapped open. She shrank back, and then a dark shape burst through the broken door. Max, thinner, soaked, covered in mud and leaves. But the eyes were still his, loyal, fierce, and filled with knowing. Max pushed into her arms, his massive body blocking the wind, his warmth flooding over her like a living blanket. Sophie sobbed, her voice cracking. "I knew it. I knew you'd find me." Max licked her cheek gently, then rested his head on her belly, gaze fixed on the door. Night fell. The forest grew eerily silent, until the first howl echoed through the trees, then another, then more. Wolves. Max growled low. He stood, positioning himself between Sophie and the door. His spine arched. His claws scraped the wood. One wolf appeared, then two, glowing eyes flashing in the lightning. "Max, no!" Sophie cried. But Max didn't wait. He charged. His body moved like a soldier. Swift, precise, unyielding. Barking thundered through the woods. Growls, snaps. A wolf lunged at Max, biting his shoulder. Max staggered, then struck back, taking the creature down. Sophie screamed, "Max!" And then, a gunshot split the air. The wolves froze. Heavy boots stomped through leaves. A flashlight cut across trunks. "Sophie!" Tom's voice thick with panic. He burst through the clearing, gun raised. The wolves fled, vanishing into the dark. Tom dropped to his knees beside Max, blood on his shoulder, but eyes sharp, still guarding. Sophie wept, not from fear this time, but from hope. "Uncle Tom," she whispered, clinging to him. "I didn't know how he'd find me, but I always knew Max would never leave me." Less than 10 minutes later, the rescue team and medics arrived. Red lights pulsed through the wet forest, bathing the trees in flashes of urgency. Sophie was gently lifted onto a stretcher. Max stayed right beside her, never leaving her side. Every time someone touched her, he growled softly, not to threaten, but as if to say, "Be careful, she means everything to me." Tom knelt beside Max, placing a firm hand on his neck. "Easy, buddy. They're here to help." Suddenly, Sophie's body jerked. Her back arched, limbs trembling. Her lips turned blue. One of the nurses shouted, "She's seizing! No meds in her system!" Max whimpered, pressing closer to the stretcher, growling in panic. His eyes locked on Sophie's, tail tucked, body trembling, terrified of losing her again. Tom wrapped both arms around Max, holding him. "It's okay, Max. She's gonna be all right. We got her back." A medic injected the emergency medication into Sophie's arm. Her body shook once more, then slowly began to calm. Her breathing steadied. Max sank to the ground, exhausted, his fur soaked in blood and rain. But his eyes never left her. He lay there alert, guarding her, loving her, even in silence. And in that moment, Tom understood. This bond between a child and her dog wasn't something the world could explain. It was love, pure, wordless, unshakable. As the team carried Sophie out of the forest, Tom turned to a rescue worker, demanding, "How did Max find her? Who had him?" The man, panting, replied, "We just got word. Someone dropped him at the shelter last week, said he was a stray, but the dog wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, until tonight. He broke through the kennel, ran straight into the storm, and straight into the woods." Tom looked at Max trotting silently beside the stretcher. The rain hadn't stopped, but inside Tom, something had cleared. 3 days later, the sun finally returned to Maple Hollow. Sunlight streamed through the hospital window, resting on Sophie's sleeping face. Her hand loosely clutched one of Max's ears, the dog lying protectively beneath her bed. Doctors said she had severe hypothermia, dehydration, and dangerously low blood pressure, but miraculously, no permanent damage. If it had been even a few hours later, they didn't finish the sentence. Tom stayed near her bed nearly the whole time. When Sophie first opened her eyes, the only thing she asked was, "Is Max staying with me?" "He's not going anywhere," Tom smiled. "He's already picked you." Meanwhile, Laura was held at the station for questioning. She sat silently in the interview room. No tears, no protests. Her public defender claimed she was cooperative, but Tom could tell. It wasn't remorse. It was emptiness. "When can I see my daughter?" she finally asked after nearly 2 hours. Tom looked her in the eye. When a child nearly dies after being abandoned, adults lose the right to ask first. The case was referred to Child Protective Services. Sophie was given the choice to see her mother. For the first time, she said no. Evan vanished. He didn't return to Laura's house after that night. When officers visited the lumber yard, they were told, "He quit the next morning, said he was moving out of state." No one really knew who Evan was. Everything about him checked out. Just enough. Clean, detached, too convenient. Tom suspected he was never planning to stay. Just another man who knew how to slip into the lives of broken people. Tom had seen too many men like that. 2 months after the storm, autumn arrived in Maple Hollow. Leaves turned gold. The wind softened. Trees, once bent by the violent winds, now stood a little straighter, as if learning slowly to hold themselves again. So did Sophie. Laura was placed in a psychiatric facility for long-term treatment. After several evaluations, doctors diagnosed her with complex post-traumatic depression, undiagnosed for years. Evan's arrival, they said, was only the trigger, the final crack in a wall already damaged. She didn't resist. She didn't beg for mercy. "As long as she's safe," she whispered to Tom during their final conversation in court, "I'll accept whatever comes." Tom said nothing. He didn't need to. Some silences held more weight than words. Evan didn't get far. A federal investigation uncovered a pattern. 3 other single mothers in nearby states, all sharing the same story. A kind man who offered help, slowly gained control, and isolated them from everyone they loved. He was arrested at the border trying to flee to Canada. The case was still unfolding, but for Tom, justice had finally caught up. Sophie officially moved in with Tom just a few weeks after guardianship was granted. Max was the first to settle in, racing around the house like he'd lived there forever. Every morning, Sophie practiced walking with a support frame. Her hands trembled, her steps slow, but her smile never wavered. "I want to stand," she said. "I want to grow up." Tom bought her a large whiteboard and hung it in the corner of her new room. Sophie began drafting her science project, Dogs and Emotional Intelligence in Post-Trauma Recovery. Max was research assistant number 1. Every day, Sophie logged his behavior. The moments he nudged her hand when she felt low. The way he rested his head in her lap when she was tired. One entry read, "Dogs don't heal wounds. They remind you you're worth healing." Tom read that line and had to turn away, just for a moment. One crisp afternoon, Sophie sat by the window, where sunlight spilled across the table like a promise. Max lay curled at her feet, his presence a quiet constant. Her fingers traced slow, thoughtful circles through his fur, as if grounding herself before saying something the world might not be ready to hear. On the table, a blank sheet of paper, an envelope, and a sky blue fountain pen. Sophie took a deep breath, then she began to write. "Dear Mom, it's been a long time since I called you Mom," with warmth in my voice. "Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever get the chance to write this. I used to be angry, deeply, quietly, because the fear of being left behind doesn't vanish in a night. It clings to your skin, silently, painfully. But Max came back for me, without anger, without blame. He just came and stayed. And I thought, maybe love doesn't always ask for explanations. Maybe I can learn that too. I'm learning to walk again. Just a few steps each day, but I feel stronger. Not just in my legs, but in my spirit. I'm drawing again. I'm doing a science project. I live with Uncle Tom. And I laugh, truly laugh. I'm not writing this to make you feel guilty. I'm writing this because I want you to know I'm still here. I forgive you. Not because what happened doesn't matter, but because I no longer want to be trapped in what you couldn't give me. I choose to let go so I can grow. If one day you're ready to really listen, I'll tell you about Max, about my sketches, and about the kind of mother I'm learning to become. I'm not perfect, neither are you. But maybe healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about planting something new where it once hurt. And if one day we both return to that place, we'll find flowers instead of silence. With love, Sophie." She folded the letter, sealed the envelope, and wrote just one word on the front: Mom. She placed the envelope gently by the windowsill, where the breeze could find it. "It's done, buddy. Now let the wind decide the rest." Max leaned in, pressing his head into her lap. Not in protection this time, but in peace. Outside, the setting sun brushed gold across the porch, casting the gentle silhouette of a girl and her dog, side by side exactly where they chose to be. On the corner of the table, Sophie's newest painting was drying. A girl by a window, curtain blowing, light touching her hair, a dog sleeping nearby. Title, Still Here, Still Healing.